Welcome to this week's episode of The Next Chapter. I'm your Amazon best-selling host, Fred Hughes. Show's all about the written word, folks. We talk about the authors, editors, publishers, illustrators, and other people who support authors in their business. Today's show, first repeat guest. William Alan Webb is going to be on later to talk about his Hit World and Valkyrie series, the new books that have recently come out, new books that are coming up. And he's also going to talk about his historical books. He's actually written nonfiction and histories in World War II. So we're going to talk to him about that. Coming up for me personally, I have a book coming up it comes out on the 27th of September. Heroes Legacy, Heroes of Britannia Book 1. This is the follow-up book or follow-up series to my Prince of Britannia series, which the ninth and final book in that series came out in July, and this is the first book in the follow-up series, which hopefully will answer questions a lot of people have about why did you end the series that way? And no spoilers I'm not going to talk about, but you see the ghostly vicar on the cover, that might have something to do with it. We'll talk more about this in next week's show. Coming up, this episode that we're taping today will come out the day before the Pecan 2024 convention starts. Pecan is a fantasy and science fiction convention here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I will be there as a professional attendee. I'm not a guest of honor or anything, but if you like the Hollows, husband and wife, HP and Jacob Hollow. And those of you who don't know, H.P. Hollow is also E.D. Sky, writer of romantic science fiction. Robert Hampson, science fiction writer and world-renowned urologist is going to be there, and some other people. Like I said, I'm not one of the major guests. I'm just there as a panelist. It's at the Holiday Inn South, and Stephanie will put there. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport South Holiday Inn, September 20th to 22nd, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'll be there all 3 days. I have panels all 3 days. If you come out Friday afternoon, I know some of you got to work, but which sucks for you, by the way. Some of you can come out 2 o'clock on Friday. I mean, I have panels all day, but 2 o'clock on Friday, I'll be shooting a live segment or a segment of this show in front of a live audience with Robert Hampson to talk about writing science fiction and how he applies science to science fiction. I think it'll be fun. So stop by and maybe you'll get to ask a question as part of the interview. So that's new book. That's Pecan. Have a story I want to tell here for a second. And I talked about it before and after. I attended a science fiction fantasy convention in Chattanooga, Tennessee back in late June called LibertyCon. Coming out of that convention, my publisher, Chris Kennedy Publishing, announced that, we're going to have a new science fiction, military science fiction anthology with some of the biggest writers in the genre participating. Rick Partlow, Terry Maggard, Jeff Chaney, Bill Frisbee. The list goes on and on of the people who are going to be in this anthology. And I was a little irked because I write for Chris Kennedy Publishing, and I sell a fair number of books, but I wasn't asked to be a part of the anthology. So I let Chris know that I wasn't exactly happy with that. So, and that was it. In reality, I didn't want to write a story for it. I don't think this will get back to Chris before I have to have the story handed in. So anyway, this past Saturday, Chris sends me a message saying, hey, you're going to send a story in for this anthology, aren't you? And I'm going, I didn't want to tell him that I hadn't planned on it, hadn't even started it. But remember, we talked about what to do when someone asks you to write in their anthology. The answer is always yes. Especially when you get to write in an anthology where there are some major other authors that are participating, because Rick Partlow's name is going to be on the cover of this book. Jeff Chaney's name is going to be on the cover, so Terry Maggart's, all these big names in military science fiction, their names are going to be on the cover of this book, and me having a story in it gets me in my name in front of their fans. So the answer for doing that is always yes. So I said, okay. And then he sweetened the deal and says, oh, and I go, well, because I told him, I said, well, if you need me to submit a story for it, thinking that someone had backed out, then I'll help you out and write a story for it. And he goes, well, he says, I need to know if you're going to submit or not, because your name's going on if you are, your name's going on the cover. So get my name on the cover, writing a short story with all these other fabulous authors. And yes, I'm not going to say who dropped out, but one of the heavy hitters decided they didn't have time to write a story for it. So the author who doesn't think of himself as much of a short story writer is now writing a short story for the third anthology that he'll be in the next 4 months, which to me is just boggles the mind. So what else? Another thing, reminder, authors that are out there, and I'm going to do a little bit more detailed next week because I got to let the time run a little bit on it. Keep track of your advertising. I look at my numbers a couple of times a day as far as overall sales numbers. For my Chris Kennedy books, I don't actually get to look at sales numbers. That's stuff that only Chris can see. But I get to see what my Amazon rankings are. And I've talked about how you can use that to see how your book is doing. And if you're running your own ads, then how to use that to sort of gauge how well your ads are doing. Well, over the course of 4 or 5 days, first, by chance, 4 or 5 days in the month of September, I noticed a sharp decline in the sales numbers for all of my books. And, just like everything else, in the economy, whether it's milk or gasoline or homes or whatever it is, there are fluctuations over time in the price of, articles. So I thought, I'm going to watch the trend and see where it goes. Well, it only got worse. And lo and behold, all of my ads had timed out. I had put a 31st of August end date on all of my ads for all of my books. So it'd been a week and I had not run a single ad. And that's the reason why my books were plummeting in sales. There was no advertising. I literally, as far as my Amazon ranking, doubled in the course of a week. I promptly restarted all my ads, fluffed them up a little bit, made them look new, put them back out there. It's been only 3 days and I'm seeing some recovery. Hopefully we'll get back to where we were. But where I'm going with all of this is you need to keep track of everything that's going on in your author life, whether it's where I'm going to be and when I'm going to be there for professional appearances, what my deadlines are and what my obligations are as far as my actual writing. Oh, shoot, I need to do my spiel for my newsletter, which, oh, by the way, I do have to do sometime today so I can get it to my publicist. And what's the status of my advertising? Because how many books did I not sell because I didn't have ads running? Probably comes to several 6-packs of beer. Anyway, after the break, we're going to talk to William Alan Webb about Valkyries and Hit World. See you then. Welcome back. First repeat guest for the shows, William Alan Webb. I think he might have been our first guest, but I asked him to come back on because he has a lot of books coming out or have just recently come out that he's responsible for. So let's welcome William Alan Webb back to the show. And as I was giving that intro, Bill, I was wondering, do I call you a publisher? Because you really sort of are, even though you seldom actually claim that title, but you are a publisher.
I am a publisher. Larry Hoy and I both own and manage Hit World Press. And when we started publishing other people, we became a publisher. It was kind of by accident. It wasn't something we had planned, but there you go.
Well, and that's sort of what we're here to talk about, because Hit World is such a great book series, between the Hit World books and the Valkyrie books. And I know you originally put them out with a publisher who shall remain nameless, and it didn't work out so well for a variety of reasons. And you took them back in, and you've been trying.
Most of which were my fault.
Well, just like all of us, we were all learning as we went along. That was, you hadn't been in the business that long when it was going on, and we all take some painful knocks along the way. Oh, I should have done that better. But anyway, you're trying to reinvigorate the brand. So talk about what's happening in Hit World and Valkyries.
For those who don't know, Hit World is a series in which murder is not murder if you hire a government-approved corporation to do the killing for you. And there are 3 branches to this corporation for the wealthy who want a concierge service, for the middle class who aren't, they want it done right, but can't afford quite the upper level, and then the street level killing. If you murder someone on your own and don't hire these people, then you are subject to anyone killing you and taking everything you own. Within this universe, the people at large who are your neighbors, your friends, and all that, none of them, it's very much like the real world, that most people don't believe in such things as magic and aliens and fairies and other dimensions, etc., UFOs. Well, my main character in the series that starts the series, Duncan Steed, doesn't believe any of that either. However, he finds out rather quickly that everything he didn't believe is true. And within that concept, things have grown and have followed him and his family as they continue to understand just how big this really is. And a while back, Larry and I were discussing the fact that we needed more of a female touch to the series, because urban fantasy and paranormal romance / romantasy, which is, this has heavily, you could classify it as that, really require and are more of a female oriented genre than male. It's not saying men don't like Jim Butcher's works and Larry Correa's and such, but our version of that is heavily influenced by the ladies. So we went to Marisa Wolf, who is one of the most talented writers working right now, and asked if she would be interested in heading up a female spinoff of that. And she said, absolutely. And that became the Valkyries Initiative, for which there are now 2 books in the series and more written and coming.
Anthology to kick that off, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
And there was an anthology that kicked that whole thing off, right?
There was. Valkyries Initiative Anthology introduced a lot of the writers in it, and they're not all female, by the way. There are a couple of men in that anthology writing from a female viewpoint. One of which was a recent guest of yours, Rob Howell. And so, yes, there was an anthology that introduced the concept of the Valkyries Initiative and what it is designed to fight. Within Hit World, there is a counter organization based in Russia known as the Spider. And they are very much the Spectre from the James Bond universe, or Hydra from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Marvel Universe. They fill that role within Hit World. They are the bad guys who are not necessarily all that much worse than the good guys.
Different flavor.
But they are a consortium of criminal elements coming together to try and replace and combat Life Enders Incorporated, which is the main version, the main organization within Hit World. Valkyries Chosen is the first book in the Valkyries series, written by Marisa Wolf. And I have to tell you that if you are a writer, you need to read the book, and you'll enjoy it. I mean, it's a phenomenal book, but that's not the reason to read it. You need to read it to study the way she wrote it. It is so perfectly written and so amusing and fast and just absolutely on point on every sentence, that it really is kind of one of those novels you read for what you get out of it above and beyond a great story.
And here's the book.
Shadows May Fall. Yes, Shadows May Fall is coming out next week from Melissa Olthoff. Melissa, and I'll tell you now, this is romantasy. I mean, yes, it's urban fantasy, and yes, it is contemporary fantasy, and checks off all those boxes, but it is romantasy, and to the point where I'm actually going to have Melissa teach my class next week. I do a writing class every 2 weeks, and she is going to be my guest to teach the students how she wrote romantasy in this book. Not to say it's not filled with action, of course it is. Action and magic and all of that are the very heart of any sort of romantasy. And that term is a splicing of romance and fantasy. But the people writing it all understand that this isn't about Regency romance type stuff. This is about the interplay between two characters within a really exciting universe and book.
When we come back from the break, Bill's going to talk about Romantasy some more and what else is coming out. We're back from the break and we're talking to William Alan Webb about Romantasy and Marisa Olthoff's new Valkyries book. So had to cut you off there, Bill, so we could pay some bills, but let's tell us some more about Romantasy and how Marisa's taken the series off in sort of a new direction.
Sure. So Romantasy is, as we were discussing before, within a really tight, fast plot, which is what we publish. This is what Hit World is. Hit World doesn't have long passages of dwelling on details or internal dialogue or any of that kind of stuff. This is a fast-paced series. And within that framework, what Marisa did was what all really good Romantasy titles do, which is she concentrated on the characters and came up with a really interesting device. It's a plot device, but a really interesting twist to the whole Romantasy trope, and that is that there's within this there's one called friends, enemies to friends, or enemies to lovers in this case. And the enemy in this case happens to be someone that the main character, is tied to. They become partners. And the problem is that, remember, this is LEI, so murder is legal, and he happens to have done something to a family member of hers, I'm not going to spoil it, that was not very nice, but he did it legally. So there can be no repercussions, yet she is forced to work with it.
Yeah, but there can be some hard feelings.
Go ahead. Well, right. And I think we all know the feeling of having to work with someone we absolutely loathe. And yet there's really nothing we can do about it. So we have to internalize all of those. And that's what happens here. Marisa is really now a terribly experienced author. But this was her third book. It was in the can for a while, and the previous publisher intended to publish it. That's who it was written for. When that all kind of got shifted over to Hit World Press, it delayed publication even further. So I think she's now has 8 or 9 published novels, but this was the second or third one that she wrote. So there's still that raw level of intensity and emotion to it, which I think and you can testify to this too, when you're a newer author or a less experienced author, while the writing itself may need more editing than usual, the emotions that come through typically are a little harder hitting than they are later on when you're no longer in that initial spurt of creativity. Mm-hmm. So many new authors always say they'll start a story or a novel and they'll get 20 or 30,000 words into it and then run out of steam. Well, that's because all those emotions and all those thoughts and things you wanted to do have already been done. And now it's like, well, oh, what? Well, this is one of those early ones where after really, really professional editing and Marisa having learned so much and going back over it herself, but keeping all of those really cool emotions from her early career. I'm really proud of them. I'm really proud to be the publisher, to be honest with you.
Okay, cool. It's always good to have good people working for you.
Oh yeah, well, working with me.
Okay.
And by the way, I will say this: in the creation of a book like this, Marisa and I kind of co-created the cover. As you probably know, I consider myself a composition and design artist. And Marisa was right there every step of the way to help me figure out what element needed to be done next and how she wanted it to look. And yet she was very realistic about it too. And that's critical to when you're trying to design the proper cover is to have that cooperation between the author and the artist. And she was great.
Yeah, because I speaking from practical experience, don't really understand what a cover artist or a creative illustrator, however you want to describe it, what they're capable of, and so I know that some authors like myself tend to be a little bit more. Well, you couldn't do any more than that. That's all I can get out of it.
Well, I'll give you an example. If you look at Athena, the main character on the cover, at her right hand, there are flames, blue flames around the hand. Well, that was not nearly as easy to create as you might think. And Melissa had very definite ideas on what she wanted them to look like. So it took me 2 or 3 tries to get them where she described them in the book and where she thought they looked proper. But when it was done, it was much better than what I had originally created for the same effect. And so, or created first for the same effect. I did all the art, but she was there to say, no, I'd really rather do this. And with the art program I use, Clip Studio Paint, it's a lot easier to do that kind of thing. And so the interplay there was very important.
So let's move on to the probably most recent book in the main series in the Hit World that Larry Hoy just released, like within the last month or so.
Okay. And with a very well-known and influential co-author.
Well, I'm going to say some of the people watching might recognize Craig Martelle's name. He's a heavyweight.
Yes.
And a friend I know. Heavyweight. Yeah, and he's a friend of Larry's. They both live up in Alaska. So let's talk about this book and how's it doing? Go ahead.
Well, the book, anything with Craig Martelle is going to sell X number of copies. And so it has, and it is a really, really excellent addition to the series, not only as a standalone book, because most of the books in Hit World can be read as a standalone. You don't have to start with book 1. Since I wrote it, I think you should, but you don't have to. And this one is the same way. And yet, if you do read them in order, Larry's main character is Luther Sweetwater. Luther was always a reluctant shooter. That's what Life Enders Incorporated assassins are called. They call themselves shooters. That doesn't mean they always shoot somebody. They can knife them or poison them or whatever, but that's just how they refer to themselves. Luther was always a reluctant shooter because he really didn't want to kill innocent people. But he had this unique talent of people who he would target wound up dead anyway, even though he didn't kill them. And so his missions were fulfilled, but he didn't fulfill them. And he wasn't sure exactly what was going on. And he also has the interesting ability of being that he can speak to dead people, and whether he wants to or not, they tend to follow him around. And one person, the first person who died as he was in a car wreck, but as Luther was focused on it, in particular, although he's now just a skeleton, still shows up every now and then to harass Luther. At any rate, as we've gone on, Luther has become more and more attuned to the universe as it really is, meaning there is magic, there are monsters. He did not want to believe any of this, but he has. Well, as he's gone on and grown, he's acquired a girlfriend. And the girlfriend happens to be the daughter of my character, Duncan Steed, who doesn't particularly like Luther. Then Luther makes a rather bad mistake in that he kills someone he probably shouldn't have killed and takes off to Alaska because there's a contract out for him. And while there and while hiding in a cabin, he comes across the Wendigo, who really doesn't want him around and has decided that he's going to take care of this intruding human. It's a really fast novel. It's a lot of fun. It continues Luther's arc into becoming one of he's already a major character within the universe, but into becoming something of a linchpin for the universe. And so it's a neat character arc from this rather naive Marine. He was a Marine scout sniper, so he's well trained at what he does, but from this rather naive Marine who had ideas of glory, but he didn't really know how the world worked behind the scenes, and he wasn't all that great at talking to girls. And so now he's becoming a very well-rounded character. And it's really been a lot of fun to watch.
When we come back, Bill's going to tell us about the other side of his business. And we're back. Thanks for hanging around. We're talking to William Alan Webb, and he's been telling us all about Hit World and Valkyries and romantasy and urban fantasy novels. And shoot, we haven't even talked about Last Brigade today, but we talked enough about that in previous interview. But let's talk about William Alan Webb, the professional historian. And you're just about ready to release. Is this the second or last book in your World War II series?
This is book 3.
Okay.
And it will probably be the last, unless there is another subject which I don't think has been properly covered yet.
Okay.
I do have one more World War II book planned, but it's a very small unit history about a very obscure unit.
So we have the cover up there, Killing Hitler's Reich, the Battle for Hungary. So
yes,
walk us through this book and what fascinated you about this obscure part of World War II.
Okay. The first book in the series is Killing Hitler's Reich, the Battle for Austria in 1945. And this book, the new one, Hungary and Austria, started as one book. And I was in Vienna in 2006 with some friends, and I mentioned that I tried to find a book that discussed the war in Austria during 1945, because if we passed a historic site, I wanted to know it. And there really weren't any. There were a few mentions here and there, and maybe a paragraph here and a paragraph there, but that was it. There were no English language histories. So I and they told me, well, that means you should write it. Like a fool, I said, okay, that's a great idea. It took 13 years for Austria to be published. And it was published with a traditional publishing house, which is good and bad. There's good and bad to that. I decided that I prefer doing this next one myself because I could control it and I could keep the price where I wanted the price to be and that sort of thing. Anyway, when I published the Austria book, it was about 284,000 words, but I had another 145,000 left that weren't part of it, that happened before it. That picks up on April 1st. This picks up on January 1st, 1945, during the Siege of Budapest, and lasts through March. Very few people in the West, meaning America, Britain too, but less so in Britain, are aware that the Third Reich put most, and Hitler in particular, assembled most of the remaining combat power of the Wehrmacht in Hungary and Austria at the end of the war. 6 of the 7 Waffen-SS panzer divisions were in Hungary and Austria at the end of the war. This has been detailed by a number of very good books, but when I write history, it's a little bit different because, yes, I concentrate on the big picture, but I also try to tell the story of the little guy, maybe some of the lesser known formations and what it was like to be them. Most histories concentrate solely on the commanders and how their decisions and things like that. Or this battalion was here and then it moved here and did this. And then this one did this and that. I want to flush it out a little bit more to give the reader an idea of what that actually means. Too many times I've read military histories where they'll mention a town and that this unit moved 14 kilometers to this town, but you don't know what that means or where it was or why it was important. And while that's all well and good, I'm not criticizing it from a standpoint of it being mine being better than that type of military history. That's not what I write. So I want the reader to come away feeling, I can retain that. I actually learned something about what's going on here.
And so basically, it sounds like you cut down your Austria book, which included some Hungary stuff, and basically separated the Hungary out and made it its own book. Obviously, you added to it.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's approaching 170,000 words now. A lot of my time working on it has been reinvestigating the sources, reformatting, editing, that sort of thing, making sure it's all cohesive. There may, at some point in the distant future, even be an expanded version of this, because while it'll probably be published in the 170,000 word range, I could easily bring this out to 400,000 words. Doing so would not be, as you know, as an author, you have to spend your time on things that are going to keep the lights on.
All right. So, Bill, Battle in Hungary. What do you think the most, let's talk about, what was your favorite part of that book?
My favorite part of writing the book was discovering how close the Germans came to actually breaking through to Budapest. That was the whole impetus in January and early February, was breaking through to the trapped garrison in Budapest. And they came very close. And it was only Hitler's interference that prevented it.
Not like he didn't do that on several occasions. Was the Budapest garrison given another one of those typical, no surrender, hold to the last man orders from?
Yeah, absolutely. And even when they were begging to be allowed to break out and had no hope, they weren't even tying down many Russian troops anymore. There was no hope of hanging on for long, but he still said no. He said, only I know the big picture.
Sounds like some other people we know. Well, I want to thank Bill for being on this week's show and being entertaining as usual and talking about something that's not made up. I mean, all of us, live in fantasy or sci-fi. Okay.
I have a question. Have you been knighted yet? Are you Sir Fred?
No.
If not, you created the Prince of Britannia.
That's
you
true.
would think that family.
I need to make an inquiry about that. But thanks for bringing that up, Bill. And now I'll be thinking about it for the next week. So I want to thank Bill for being on the show. That's it for this week on The Next Chapter. I'm Fred Hughes. I hope to see you next week.